We're getting closer and closer to your vision becoming a reality. We've looked at how to come up with expectations for your students based on those core values, how to explicitly teach them to your students, how to observe that behavior and reinforce and redirect when needed. We're two steps closer to that vision becoming a reality. And we're going to look in this module at the third component of a PBIS system, and that's data collection. Data collection is an integral part of the PBIS system. It is essential to ensuring that your vision becomes a reality. Why? Because it's about prevention. PBIS is built on the idea, as we've been saying all along, that prevention is the best intervention. And in order to prevent behavior interruptions from happening in our classroom, we have to have a really good sense of what behaviors we need to target. What behaviors do we need to meet head on and give our students proactive strategies for, and for us to take proactive steps to mitigate those behaviors? So we're going to think about data collection in two capacities, one from a teacher perspective and also from the student perspective as well. So again, when we think about data, what strategies are we using to track student behavior? How are we using that data to provide the correct and appropriate interventions for small groups of students, larger groups of students? And really importantly, how are we using data as a way to communicate with other invested parties in the PBIS system? So we won't spend too much time on that part because for the purpose of this course, you, as I've been sort of reiterating throughout, you might be going this alone. You might be one teacher in one building trying something new. But I would encourage you to really keep a lot of data so that if you want to start that conversation with administration or other colleagues, you have some real good evidence to support what you're asking for. And there it is, data. So when we think about data collection, the data that we're collecting should improve our behavior supports. It should help us identify where our explicit instruction should be focused and what behaviors need to be reinforced. And what I want to reiterate here is that this is a continuous cycle. And as you'll see in some scenarios later, certain times of the year are going to necessitate different focuses, different behaviors to be targeted, right? We're going to have to revisit our matrices. We're going to have to, reinforce behaviors that we thought maybe were sort of mastered earlier in the year. We might have to spend some time reinforcing them after a vacation or after a long weekend or after a traumatic event. So it's a cycle. And our data collection can help us with that. The other aspect that data collection should focus on is it should help us to evaluate for us as teachers the effectiveness of our behavior supports and to really look at, all right, well, this approach is working for this particular group of students, but I have a small group that might need some more targeted intervention. And that's where those tier 2 and tier 3 interventions we looked at in module 2 might come in. And which behaviors have our students mastered? When is it time to kind of loosen our hold on some of those expectations and focus on something else? All of that data collection and all of those types of data should be part of our system. You saw in the video that one of the most important things that we need to consider when we're collecting data is that behavior has an operational definition, that what information we're trying to collect is observable. The good news is you already have all of that. You already have operational definitions for the behavior data you're going to collect. You've already clearly defined for yourself whatever your core values are: respect, responsibility, fairness, whatever they are. You've clearly defined and made those observable to you and to your students. You know what the behavior should look like. You know what it should sound like. And when it is or isn't happening, you can easily gather that data. So, how should you collect some of this data? The video you watched talked about three types of data: frequency, duration, and latency. This is a chart that we looked at in one of the first modules, um, where you had a chart and you were just sort of tracking the frequency of particular behaviors you wanted to target. I went ahead and I updated that chart for you to consider frequency and duration, so that if this was something you wanted to use in your classroom and you wanted to target specific behaviors, you could track how often a behavior is happening and how long the behavior is lasting. And that's going to help you determine sort of where to go next with it, how to reteach or reinforce where there might be some problems. So this is here for you. You have access to it. And again, you once you make a copy of it yourself, you can change these behaviors to anything that fits your needs. Some other ways that you might collect that data. This comes from a resource that pbis.org puts out, and it refers to the behaviors as counting behaviors and timing behaviors, but this is really frequency and duration. And I would encourage you to take a peek at this because it does give you some different strategies or ways that you might track that behavior. So that spreadsheet is obviously one way, but is it the most efficient way for you to use it in your classroom when you're trying to teach? Maybe not. You could do something that the students are involved in as well, and make it visible to them by moving paper clips or clothespins a certain amount of times. If you're tracking a behavior, say for that day you're working on not calling out. So maybe every time that the students do call out, you move a clip or you make a tally or something that they can see as well. Okay. There are some apps that you could download as well. And you see some similar strategies here for timing as well. Um, again, so that the students are involved in that data collection process along with you. Latency is how much time is in between the antecedent or prompt and the behavior. So I often think of this type of data um, as a real direct connection to how much instructional time are we losing to redirection. So that if you ask your students to push in their chairs and line up, how much time does that take? And this is a really powerful piece of data to collect with your students so that they can really start to understand and see the impact of the choices that they're making. You know, if it takes 5 minutes every time to get lined up silently for the hallway, that really adds up, and really has a significant impact on maximizing that instructional learning time. So the beauty of an Apple Watch is great for that if you happen to have one, and tracking that time, or a timer on your smart board, or you could even ask, one of your responsible students who's a model in a particular area to be your timekeeper for you. I often I would use this type of data as a challenge for my students. And I actually do it at home with my kids as well. And I'll say to them, how long do you think it would take you to push in your chairs and line up silently? You think it's going to take you a minute? Let's try to beat the timer. Let's see if we can do it in 45 seconds so that we set a goal that we're working on together as a class. So, what I would like you to do next in the explore section is there's two scenarios that you're going to read, and they really just sort of outline an elementary perspective for a PBIS system and then a secondary level as well. So pick one that matches best for you. And as you're reading through, I'm asking you to kind of highlight and annotate where you see evidence of a data-driven system in those classroom scenarios. Where do you see evidence of teachers gathering data about the frequency of a behavior or the latency or the duration? And how are they taking that data and then revising their practice based on it? I think these scenarios are a good way for you to start to really see all these pieces of the PBIS system come together. So I'm going to take a pause here, leave you to that, and then we are going to check back in with some more data-driven conversations in just a bit.